Hello, this is Frederick Okleka, AI Breach Report, Wednesday, 8th July and Friday, 10th July, 2026. This week three things happened, and all three of them share a single uncomfortable conclusion. First, a credential harvesting campaign against Fortinet firewalls, which many of you will have read about weeks ago and mentally filed away as handled, has now been formally linked to two ransomware operations. The credentials stolen in that campaign are not sitting in a criminal archive gathering dust. Researchers now assess that the people who harvested them are affiliates of the ransomware groups themselves. And those groups target financial services, professional services, and healthcare organizations of exactly your size. So, second, excuse me, a critical flaw in Cisco's business telephone and video calling platform is now confirmed under active attack. It gives an attacker with no login, no password, and no prior access complete administrative control of the system that runs your phones. It was patched over a month ago. 200 internet-facing systems are still exposed. I remember I covered this a month ago, and I proceeded and I patched. I did the necessary with my own business line at my office, but this issue is still prevalent, and it is happening. 200 internet-facing systems are still exposed. So if you go to Shodan.io and you do a sweep, this Shodan shows you which systems, any system, whether it has no passwords or it has password protection. Now, third, a maximum severity flaw in remote support software is being used to plant a credential thief that specifically hunts for your cloud platform keys, your developer access tokens, and the login credentials for your artificial intelligence coding tools, Claude, Gemini, Codex, named explicitly in the malware. So these are the three main headlines. So this is the AI breach report from Frederick Cybersecurity. I am Frederick Wakuliaka. This week I am covering both editions in a single briefing. Wednesday, which documented what happened, and Friday, which documented what to do about it. And I want to state that the conclusion at the front, because it is the reason all three of these services, it's the reason all three of these stories belong in the same briefing. The most consequential security decisions in front of you right now are about credentials, not software. Let us get into it. I was busy over the weekend trying to sort out that credential problem with my N8N workflow, and I realized that this is true. The most consequential security decisions it's all about credentials, not the software. Let us get into it. Chapter 1, FortiBleed, why an old story became a new one. FortiBleed is the name given to a credential harvesting operation running against Fortinet. FortiGate firewalls. If your organization has a firewall or a virtual private network gateway and many of you do without knowing the brand name. This is the category of device we are discussing. It sits at the edge of your network. Everything that comes in and goes out passes through it. The campaign works in two stages, and both numbers you may have seen reported are correct. They are measuring different things. The first stage is getting in. The attackers scan the internet for Fortinet devices with an exposed management interface. More than 430,000 of them, and then attempted to log in. They did that using credentials stolen in earlier unrelated breaches. On the reasonable assumption that people reuse passwords and organizations do not rotate them. Where that failed, they used brute force, accelerated by artificial intelligence, against devices with weak passwords and no multi-factor authentication. The second stage is the one that makes this campaign different. Once they were inside the firewall, they installed a custom tool that abuses a legitimate diagnostic feature built into the Fortinet operating system, a feature designed to let engineers inspect network traffic for troubleshooting. They used it to sit quietly and watch every authentication that passed through the device. Every time one of your staff logged into the virtual private network, the compromised firewall captured the credential, not by attacking them, by watching patiently. That is why this campaign was so difficult to detect. There was no unusual scanning to flag no failed login pattern from your side of the network. It looked like ordinary traffic passing through an ordinary firewall. The result is a verified database of more than 86,000 confirmed working credentials across 194 countries. Not credentials that might work, credentials that researchers tested and found valid. None of that was the news last week. That was already known. The news this week is who is using them. Researchers have now formally linked FortiBleed to two ransomware operations. They are called INC or Ink Ransom and Links. I want you to hear the precise wording of that link because it changed in the last week and the change matters. The initial assessment was that FortiBleed was a separate criminal business and access broker, which harvested credentials and then sold them on to ransomware groups. The updated assessment published in a follow-up technical paper is stronger. Researchers now assess with high confidence that the FortiBleed campaign is operated by affiliates of INC, and Links themselves, not a supplier selling to them. The evidence is unusually direct. Researchers get visibility into the attacker's own servers after an operational security lapse and found a single operator logged into the ransom negotiation panels of both Ink Ransom and Links, actively engaging with victims over payment. Separately, the victims recorded in FortiBleed's internal tracking documents overlap with victims already claimed by Ink Ransom. Ink Ransom has been operating since mid-2023. Among its publicly confirmed victims is NHS Scotland. I think I've talked about this when I used to do I did some video. When I used to do these videos, I would talk about the cybercrime in the UK, and this was one of them. I think it featured with the NatWest story in one of my older videos. So there are these cyber breaches I used to talk about. So amongst these public confirmed victims is NHS Scotland. It has also targeted legal practices, accountancy firms, and financial services organizations. Links emerged roughly a year later and is widely assessed to be an evolved version of Ink. Same code base, different brand. Both groups steal your data before they encrypt it, which gives them two separate forms of leverage when they come to negotiate. And here are the numbers that tell you this is not theoretical. Administrator level access confirmed on 409 organizations. On 354 of them, the attackers completed the full chain from the initial firewall compromise through to domain controller access, through to domain administrator rights across the entire network. That is the level of access from which ransomware gets deployed to every machine at once rather than to one. 12 ransomware deployments have been confirmed so far, hundreds of endpoints encrypted. Now, the timing, and this is the figure I want you to write down. Get your pen. The researcher's assessment is that a 40 bleed is that a 40 bleed credential exposure should be treated as a ransomware precursor, with deployment possible within 30 to 60 days of the credentials being taken. The credentials were being harvested from February. Do that arithmetic against today's date and understand what it means for some organizations. The deployment window is not approaching, it is open. There is one more detail worth knowing because it tells you where this is going. The primary operator of this campaign uses the alias Toxman, and according to the researchers who recovered the campaign's internal documentation, Toxman relied heavily on artificial intelligence tooling to build and automate the attack chain. An open source penetration testing agent called CyberStrike, and a service called Open Router that provides access to a range of artificial intelligence models. I use Open Router from time to time. So it is a tool that even bad actors would use. It is convenient. It is open source. Open source penetration testing agent called CyberStrike, and a service called Open Router. Open Router provides access to a range of artificial intelligence models, DeepSeek, Quen, GEMS, ChatGPT, Llama 3, name it. Those tools were used to conduct reconnaissance, to interact with firewall management panels, and to identify weaknesses at machine speed. I want you to sit with the arithmetic there. Roughly 20 people, 430,000 firewalls. That ratio does not work with human labor. It works because the machines did the scanning, the probing, and the iterating, and the humans supervised. This is part of the story that will not stay confined to Fortinet. This is the part of the story that will not stay confined to Fortinet. The barrier to running a campaign of this scale used to be expertise and headcount. That was the barrier before. It's no longer the case. So I had talked about that this part of the story will not stay confined to Fortinet. The barrier to running a campaign of this scale used to be expertise and headcount. Artificial intelligence tooling has removed most of both. What 20 people did to 430,000 firewalls this year, a similar group will do to a different class of device next year. I want to name the assumption that this entire story destroys because I think many of you are holding it. The assumption is that if you dealt with a security disclosure, you read the alert, you asked your IT service provider, they reset something, you moved on, then that disclosure is closed. Past remediation is evidence of good process. It is not proof of current safety. These two things are not the same, and they should never be presented to a board or an insurer as though they were. So let us close that chapter temporarily. You see, these things keep coming back again. You can't totally, entirely close it. But let us move on to the next one. The chapter 2, 40 bleed, what to do about this. There is no patch that fixes this. I want to be very clear about that, because it is the part that gets deferred. The campaign exploited stolen credentials and weak authentication. That means the remediation is not a software update that your IT provider can schedule into a maintenance window and tick off. It is operational, it is human, and precisely because it does not fit nearly into a change management process, it is the kind of work that gets pushed to next month. Do not push it to next month. There are three phases, and they run in order. Phase 1 is immediate exposure control. Terminate every active administrative session on every Fortinet device. Rotate every administrator password and every virtual private network user password, particularly on any device with an internet-facing interface. Rotate them to credentials that are genuinely new, not a variation on the old password, not the old password with a number on the end. Enforce multi-factor authentication on every administrator account and every virtual private network account. Fortinet's own advisory says this. The American Cybersecurity Agency's alert says this, and their attack data confirms it. Devices with multi-factor authentication enabled faced meaningfully lower risk even within the same targeted dataset. I repeat, the attack data confirms it. Devices with multi-factor authentication enabled faced meaningfully lower risk even within the same targeted dataset. Then the next thing you should do is restrict the management interface so that it cannot be reached from the public internet at all. Device administration should only be possible from a trusted internal network, intranet. That single change removes the service That single change removes the surface through which this campaign found its targets in the first place. Phase 2 is verification. It is not enough to believe these steps have been taken, they must be confirmed. Two security firms, SockRider and Hudson Rock, have made free exposure checkers available. You enter your domain and the tool tells you whether your organization appears in the harvested credential dataset. Any organization running Fortinet devices should query both tools today. So you have two security firms, Socrada and Hudson Rock. They have made free exposure checkers available. You can look them up. So one caution on that, a negative result is not a clearance. The data set is known to be incomplete and harvesting was still ongoing when it was published. A negative result gives you reassurance. It does not give you certainty. Phase 3 is forensic review. Audit your Fortinet device configurations against a known good baseline. Look specifically for new administrator accounts that nobody in your organization created. Look for changes to logging or authentication settings. Look for unexpected changes to interface permissions in the audit log. And understand the blast radius, because this is the part that surprises people. Compromised devices were used as listening posts, capturing additional credentials as they passed through the virtual private network tunnel. So the exposure is not limited to the firewall itself. It extends to every credential that has authenticated through that firewall. Your domain controller logs should be reviewed for signs of lateral movement across any period in which that device may have been exposed. Chapter 3, Cisco Unified Communications Manager. What happened? Cisco Unified Communications Manager is the platform that routes and manages business telephone calls, video calls, and internal messaging for a large number of organizations. If your desk phones run through Cisco infrastructure, this is that system. The flow is tracked as CVE 2026-20230. That reference means it is a formally documented, independently verified vulnerability, and this one is a server-side request forgery flow. In plain language, that means an attacker can trick the server into making requests on their behalf that it should never have accepted. What that allows is this. An attacker with no valid login of any kind sends a specially crafted web request to the system. That request causes the system to write a file onto its own underlying operating system, and that file becomes a foothold from which the attacker escalates to root level control. To root level control, meaning complete administrative ownership of the device. No password, no prior access, no member of your staff needs to click anything. Cisco patched this on the 3rd of June. At the time, Cisco stated that it had no evidence of the flaw being used in real attacks. Roughly 3 weeks later, threat intelligence researchers observed active exploitation. The American Cybersecurity Agency added it to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. On the 25th of June, with a 3-day remediation deadline for federal agencies. That is CISA. So that deadline has now passed by 12 days, and 200 internet-facing systems are still exposed. There is a detail here that I want business owners specifically to hold on to. Cisco itself did not confirm active exploitation in its own advisory until the 1st of July, nearly 10 days after independent researchers had already reported it publicly. If your organization waits for the vendor to tell you something is urgent, you are working from information that may be 10 days behind the attackers, as in this case it is. Chapter 4, Cisco Unified CM, what to do. This is the Friday edition is the defense edition where I give solutions to problems which we uncover on Wednesday in the AI breach report. So Friday's edition is the practical solutions or what to do, the how. The other is the why. This is the how. How do we solve it? How do we solve this problem? So the remediation path depends on which version you are running. And this is the specific question to put to your IT team or managed service provider. If you are on release 14, the fixed version is 14 SU6. It is available now. Apply it. If you are on release 15, the full service update is not scheduled until September 2026. Cisco has provided an interim patch file as a temporary measure. It does not give identical coverage to the full update, but it materially reduces the attack surface while you wait. Now, the interim control, which is available to everyone regardless of version, and which can be done today without a maintenance window. It's very simple. I'm giving it to you now. Disable web dialer. Disable web dialer. Web dialer is the click to dial feature that lets staff place calls directly from a web browser. The vulnerability is not the vulnerability is only exploitable when web dialer is running. It is disabled by default, which means many of you are not exposed at all, but you need to confirm that rather than assume it. It is. So the check takes 2 minutes. In the Cisco Unified CM administration interface, go to Tools, then Service Activation, confirm web dialer is unchecked, save. If web dialer is required for how your business actually operates, you do not get to leave it enabled and unpatched. You escalate the patching window instead. Two more things. Block public internet access to the unified CM management interface. That is a configuration change, not a software change, and it does not require a downtime. It should happen before the weekend is over. And if you have been running web dialer enabled at any point since the 3rd of June, you need a forensic review. Since search the temporary directories and other writable locations on the system for unexpected files created after that date. Examine the web dialer logs for suspicious request parameters and file address payloads. There is one further consequence worth naming out loud. Because it does not appear on any technical checklist, if your telephone system is compromised, you lose the ability to coordinate a response by phone at exactly the moment you most need it. Every organization running business critical calling on this platform should have a documented, tested fallback communication method that does not depend on it. Discovering you do not have one during a live incident is a bad moment to find out. Chapter 5, Simple Help and Digin Stealer. What happened? This is the story I would prioritize if you only have time for one story. Simple Help is remote monitoring and management software. It is the category of tool that your IT support team or your managed service provider uses to reach into your computers and fix things without walking over to your desk. It exists specifically to grant one technician broad administrative reach across many machines at once. That design property is exactly what makes the flaw so serious. The vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2026-48558. It carries the maximum possible severity score 10 out of 10. That rating means it requires no authentication, no prior access, and no action from any of your staff to exploit. It is an authentication bypass. In plain language, an attacker with no credentials whatsoever can submit a forged login token and be granted a fully authenticated technician session. The same trusted access a legitimate support engineer has, including the ability to transfer files and execute commands on every system that server manages. The attacker does not compromise your machines one at a time. They forge one session on the central server, and every machine that server manages inherits the trust. Attackers exploited this to deploy two previously undocumented pieces of malicious software. The first is called Taskweaver. It is a loader. It disguises itself as an ordinary JavaScript library file named jQuery.js, establishes an encrypted channel back to the attacker, and then delivers whatever the attacker chooses to send it. What it delivers is the second piece, and it is the one that matters. It is called Digin Stealer. Digin Stealer runs on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux, and its target list tells you exactly how the criminal economy has changed. It does not primarily want your browser passwords. It wants cloud platform access keys for Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and Oracle. It wants credentials for Okta, Cloudflare, DigitalOcean, and HashiCorp Vault. It wants your software repository tokens, your SSH keys, your your container configurations, and your package publishing credentials. And it specifically hunts for the authentication tokens belonging to artificial intelligence development tools. Anthropic, Claude, Google Gemini, OpenAI Codex, named explicitly with dedication, named explicitly with dedicated collection logic built for them. Malware authors do not build dedicated collection logic for something they consider incidental. They build it for things they consider valuable. Chapter 6, Simple Help. What to do and the part everyone misses. This is the solution for simple health. Simple help. The patching path is simple. Simple Health versions 5.5.16 and 6.0 RC2 fix the flaw. If immediate upgrade is not feasible, disabling OpenID Connect authentication entirely removes the condition that makes exploitation possible, because the vulnerability lives specifically in how Simple Help validates OpenID Connect login tokens. But here is the part that has received insufficient attention, and it is the reason this story sits above the other two. The research firm that investigated the live intrusion issued a specific warning. The most damaging outcome from this attack may occur long after the compromised computer has been isolated and wiped. Think carefully about what that means. Once the gene stealer has copied and transmitted a cloud platform access key or a GitHub token or an artificial intelligence platform credential, that credential works independently of the machine it was taken from. The attacker does not need to redeploy any malware. They do not need to break in again. They simply use the credential through the legitimate service it was designed to access and walk it back and walk back into your environment through the front door. They simply use the credential through the legitimate service it was designed to access and walk back into your environment through the front door. Patching Simple Help closes the delivery channel. Wiping the infected machine closes the delivery channel. Neither one closes the access. So a stolen credential does not expire when the it doesn't expire when the device that held it is wiped. It persists until it is explicitly rotated. So if you may have been affected, and I want to define that term precisely because it is broader than most of you assume, you must rotate credentials. Affected does not only mean organizations that run Simple Help themselves, it means any organization whose managed service provider used the vulnerable Simple Health instance. That is a very different and much larger population. Rotate every category of credential that could have been stored on any device managed through that server. cloud platform access keys and secret keys, source control tokens for GitHub and GitLab, SSH keys, container registry and package publishing credentials, artificial intelligence platform API keys, and there is an audit step that gives you a definitive answer on whether you were exploited. In the simple help administrative panel, go to administration, then technicians, and enable the display of group authenticated users. Any technician account that does not correspond to a non-member of your support team is evidence the bypass was used. Then compare your simple help authentication logs against your identity provider's own audit logs. A simple help login event with no matching event at the identity provider means the token was forged rather than issued. That is not a suspicion, that is proof. These three, chapter 7, the connecting thread. These three stories look unrelated: a firewall campaign, a telephone system flaw, a remote support tool. They connect through an observation, and it is the reason this briefing exists. In every case, the attack works because it inherits the legitimacy of something you already trust. A stolen Fortinet administrator credential does not look like a brute force attack when it authenticates. It looks like an authorized administrator logging in. A forged simple help technician session does not look like a malware when it transfers files and runs commands. It looks like your IT support doing its job. A stolen cloud access key does not look like an intrusion when it creates a resource or reads data. It looks like an authorized developer request. This is a deliberate strategic choice by sophisticated attackers, and it has a direct consequence for how you defend. Detection cannot rely only on recognizing malicious software or known attack patterns, because there is no malicious software to recognize. It must include behavioral analysis, asking whether the accounts and credentials being used are behaving consistently with their normal pattern, regardless of whether the login itself appeared valid. And there is a second consequence for the boardroom rather than the server room. The traditional network perimeter is no longer where the real boundary of your organization sits. The boundary now runs through the individual browser sessions, cloud platform keys, and artificial intelligence tool credentials, wherever your staff happen to be working. Chapter 8, the one strategic decision. If you take nothing from this briefing, take this. Your organization needs a formal credential audit and rotation program. Not a password policy refresh, not an email to staff about strong passwords, an active audit of every category of credential in your environment: administrative passwords, virtual private network credentials, cloud platform access keys, software repository tokens, SSH keys, service account passwords, and artificial intelligence platform keys, with a documented record of when each was last rotated and when it is next due. The business case for this is not a cybersecurity argument, it is a business continuity argument. The ransomware affiliates running FortiBleed operate on three assumptions: that organizations do not rotate credentials proactively, that stolen credentials from 18 months ago may still be valid, and that the gap between credential theft and credential detection is long enough to complete an intrusion and establish persistence before anyone notices. Every one of these assumptions is a bet against you. And right now, for most organizations, it is a bet they win. Credentials rotated on a regular cycle, 90 days or less for high privilege accounts, give an attacker a dramatically shorter window of usefulness. Had that control been in place at the organization's hit by 40 bleed, the campaign would have been largely ineffective. The cost of rotating credentials on a schedule is administrative. The cost of discovering a ransomware group has been sitting in your network for 3 weeks using credentials that should have expired is operational, financial, legal, and reputational. That is the AI breach report for Wednesday the 8th and Friday the 10th of July 2026. 3 questions before Monday. Ask them out loud to the person responsible and do not accept a reassurance in place of an answer. One, does your organization use Fortinet firewalls or virtual private network gateways, either directly or through your managed service provider? If yes or uncertain, have all administrator and virtual private network credentials been rotated? Is multi-factor authentication enforced? Is the management interface reachable from the public internet? And has your domain been checked against the SOC radar and Hudson Rock exposure tools? 2, does your organization run Cisco Unified Communications Manager? If yes, which release version has the patch been applied? And is web dialer enabled or disabled? 3, who has remote access to your systems and what software do they use to exercise it? Your managed service provider, your IT support team, and a software vendor with remote support access. The specific question is whether any of them uses simple help, and if so, whether they have updated to version 5.5.16 or later. The third question is a vendor management question. Put it in writing, get the answer in writing. None of these are large projects. Each one is a conversation and a decision. But here is what I want you to sit with. If your organization was caught by any of these 3, you would find out this week. You would find out in 3 weeks when the encryption starts, or in 3 months when the key is used. The window in which you can still act is the window you are in right now. The AI Breach Report publishes every Wednesday and Friday on LinkedIn. To get to listen and have me give you the scenario and the solutions, the actions you should take, that's why you tune in for the AI Breach Report, which I give at Frederick Wakuliaka 4561 on YouTube. There you can get and listen. You can get a visual report if you have a problem reading. So you may not have the time. So you can get it like I'm giving it to you now, and you can follow up. So thank you for listening.